Hey y'all, I'm Kat.
And I'm Michelle.
Welcome to this week's episode of Bama Blue Dots. This week we are joined by candidate for Alabama House District 28, Robert Hunter.
Excited to be here.
Robert, I'm going to kick this off by learning about you. So please tell us about yourself and why you're running for office.
Yes, my name is Robert Lewis Hunter. I'm running for House District 28. I have been a Democratic Youth Caucus member for the Democratic Party for almost 7 years now. I ran a free store locally in Gadsden for 3 years. I also ran Pride in my local area as an ally for 3 years. I also was on the board overseeing six-figure budget for a youth leadership engagement organization that covers the Appalachian Trail called Stay Together Appalachian Youth, or STAY.
That's quite a resume. So, House District 28 is the Gadsden area. Can you tell us a bit about your district and the biggest issues facing it right now?
Yes, it covers the Etowah County metro area because it covers Gadsden, Attala, part of Rainbow City, a part of Gallant Ively, and a little bit of Tillerson Bend. The top of it ends roughly where the mountain begins, and the bottom of it's right above Southside. A few of the issues really just harken back to affordability or lack thereof. Most community members are struggling to find employment that is going to pay enough for them to eat. And if they are able to eat, they have to make other sacrifices to pay the electric or the rental bills. And also, environment as a whole has been an issue because community members have had issues with high rates of cancer in certain areas. In general, overall sickness and asthma increases that have been prevalent in the area.
Speaking of affordability, I know I'm hearing a lot of talk about this Alabama power rate freeze. That's affecting your area, correct?
Yes.
So please forgive my ignorance on this because Alabama Power doesn't have much of a presence in Baldwin County where we are, so I'm not super familiar what's going on. I hear the phrase rate freeze and automatically I think it's a good thing, but there's definitely more to the story, isn't there?
Yes, I would say it's technically a good thing if you could already afford the freeze. If you can afford the freeze, which is a lot of people, it's not that great. We're talking about people, myself included, who had at one point power bills in the summer of $700 to $800. We're talking about specifically most people are on a budgeted system, and if they want to get off the budgeted system to actually just pay what they owe, it's $700 to $800 to get out of it. We're talking about a freeze that'll only last 1 to 2 years, just enough to get us out of an election season. And then once the elections are over, for the people that can regulate them, they're going to end the freeze and increase the rate because we've been on a rental increase rate going back to 2018.
When you say the budget system, what is that?
So what they do is they will give you an average of what you normally would spend. The average you've spent the last 4 or 5 months have been $500, so you're going to pay $500. Now the problem is sometimes you're like, I wasn't even in the house for 10 of those days. It shouldn't be 500. Like, hey, we're just basing it on the average. Okay, I want to pay what I actually am using. I'm like, okay, great. You got to pay to get off of that. That's a $700 to $800 fee for you to do it. So most people can't.
This budget system basically takes your power and turns it into a flat rate bill. So let's say you use $1,000 worth of power one. You would still be paying that average or it would penalize you.
So what ends up happening, you pay 1,000 one month, you pay 800 the next month. And after that point, you pay somewhere between 9 to 950. But the problem is, if you had 1,800 and then 100, rather than paying 100, you're going to be paying 550 something.
When I lived in Mobile a few years ago, I had Alabama Power, and I remember when they kind of first rolled that out, and you had to have like 12 months of service for them to be able to average that to be able to give you kind of a stable bill. But I could see that people trying to cut cost and maybe they get a window unit instead of running your whole AC, now being stuck paying these outrageous prices.
And then they charge you to get off of that plan.
Yes.
Typically, where you buy your home, you're assigned a power company. You don't get to shop it around. And so I'm hearing a lot of talk about, Alabama Power having a monopoly on the system? Because you said they do or they don't sell power to other companies in the state too.
If I understand correctly, they do. But it's one of those situations where, for the most part, they are the only game in town, which gives them a lot of power when it comes to negotiations or lack thereof.
Pretty much people are you're stuck with your power company and they can do whatever the hell they want essentially.
They wouldn't say we're doing whatever the hell they want. They would say we're doing what's in the best interest of Alabamians. And because most of y'all only have one power source, whatever's best for us is best for you.
So repackaged, we're gonna do whatever we want, whether you like it or not. Well, I guess that's corporate America for you, huh?
Yeah, we're seeing real time how much of a danger corporate America can have if there's a monopoly behind them.
I haven't done any research into this piece of it. Like I've my husband actually, as he was leaving, told me to ask you this question. What are your thoughts on privatizing the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority?
Well, I think it's a terrible idea. The thing is, a lot of conservatives don't believe in the idea of any form of specific protections to and from those individuals when it comes to public goods, which is the reason why I am against it, in part because you privatize the TVA, you get Alabama power bills. Privatization just means it goes from being a public good to a capitalized good, and the whole point of capitalized goods is to make profit.
It goes from pleasing the people to trying to please the shareholders. Aside from power bills, affordability is clearly a huge issue across the state, whether it's your power bills, your healthcare, groceries, housing. I know you're running on a platform that is also encouraging rent stabilization, correct?
Yes.
Can you explain what that means? Because a lot of people confuse it with complete rent freezes or rent control. I work in real estate and I hear a lot of people talking about this and how any sort of government interference with rent or housing or anything like that, it's pretty much akin to communism. So can you explain it to me like I'm five? Because, like I said, I think there's a lot of confusion out there about it.
I would start with learning what the definition of words mean. That's the first thing that has to be addressed. Under a communistic system, roughly everyone has the same amount of things, which is understandable that someone who is in some type of capitalistic property management would be against. To be clear, that's different than socialism or capitalism, which both say you can own private property. The next step of that question would be we now established that you not being able to own property is communism. You being able to own property is capitalism, and you being restricted on how much property you could potentially own to the detriment of everyone else is socialism. But for most people, they just like the words government bad. Currently, where are we right now?
A dystopian hellscape, but
Yeah, that's what I mean is if we're doing well, there shouldn't be any homeless people. What I'm for specifically is a rental cap, essentially saying that you cannot increase your rent rates more than 10% year over year because most Alabamians do not make a 10% increase in their salary year over year. Can you tell me the last time you remember making two back to back 10% increases in your salary?
that I don't think a time that has ever happened, at least in my lifetime.
For the vast majority of people, that is not a realization, especially in this economy. It hasn't been a realization, I would say, since about 2018, 2019. You almost have to hop jobs to see that type of increase.
Hmm.
It's not something where you can stay in your job and expect a 10% year over year raise. It's normally like a 2 to 3%. And nowadays, you're lucky just to have a job and not be laid off.
And that's just to go neutral because inflation, because we use paper money, is 2 to 3%. So you're negative 2, 3% year over year. So what ends up happening is you're always backsliding into the chances of in poverty, even homelessness. And currently, we are the wealthiest country in the world. We have plenty of homes. And I'm not saying that you can't make profit. I am simply saying you can't make profit to the point that you make people homeless because you have four houses and you're trying to get an 80% increase.
And that's what I feel like there's such a lack of understanding about what so many on the left are fighting for. Like you said, America has more wealth than anywhere, but American people don't. A handful of Americans do. But the American people as a whole, like, we're struggling. It's so infuriating to see people who are struggling just as much as I am, if not more, voting to further empower these billionaires. I'm not against capitalism entirely, but I think there needs to be controls to prevent exploitation.
Talked about this last episode, living in an apartment. When I moved in 2018, it cost us $1,100 a month in rent. Year over year, even though I sign a very long lease, as long as they'll let me sign it for the discount, I now pay almost $2,000 a month. 7 years. It'll be our 8th year in August.
I will say that is one of the reasons why I am a democratic socialist is because I believe the very definition of capitalism as we currently have it is to profit somebody. If it's not profiting you, you're being the profit of someone else. Also, there's issue with that because certain people will then use whatever tools possible for them to make more money. So, for example, if they found it to be profitable to do slavery, they will just do it. It's not a coincidence that people inside of the prison system, when they work or are forced to work, only make somewhere between 10 cents to $3 an hour, which is not our minimum wage. That is a slave wage, only legal because of two reasons. Number one, Alabama is, well, Alabama, and we have a long history of the Supreme Court and other people having to step in to stop us from being exploitative towards people. And number two, the 13th Amendment says we can treat anyone who's in prison however we want to because they're slaves by another name. The point of capitalism is to make a margin of profit. The more profit you make, the better you are at capitalism. But also, what are the moral the another issue is it's not moralistic. It's specifically to make money. And if you find a better way of making money, people are more likely going to give money to you. It's just the economy. And that's what some people will say is it's just the economy. I don't know about y'all, but could you eat a 90% increase in your rental?
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I mean, I'm stuck. I hate my house, but I can't afford to move. We couldn't survive if our mortgage went up by 90%. There's no way.
I will say I know of people who have had anywhere from 90% to 120% increases in their rent, which is another issue. If you couldn't eat the extra $400 to $1,000 per month, how are you going to eat $1,000 to $3,000 is going to cost you to move into a new place? Again, how many of us have $3,000 to pull out of our pocket and it does not affect your bills and it does not affect your savings?
It drives me nuts when people say, well, if you don't like it, just move. Moving is not cheap. I could move an hour away into the middle of nowhere. Well, now I've got to pay the wear and tear on my car, the gas mileage, the time, all of that stuff. There's no easy solution that everybody, especially on the right, tries to make it seem like there is. So just so I'm clear, so what you're talking about is basically it's a cap on what you can increase the rent by. Now, does it take into account improvements you've done or anything like that? Or is it pretty much just a hard cap across the board?
Currently, a hard cap up to 10% just because there will be plenty of people who will find ways around it. What some people will do is if they got more than 100 houses, they'll tear out the toilet of every single house, incur about a five to $10,000 fee to replace the toilets, say it's an improvement for every single one. A great example being the way Donald Trump would depreciate his properties and then would not have to pay taxes or pay low to zero taxes for years based off of that depreciation 3 or 4 years before.
Yeah, I'm just envisioning a bunch of landlords doing like peel and stick backsplashes. I've improved it. I'm exempt. Just doing, I call those repairs the landlord specials. I could definitely see people abusing that for sure.
What we've seen happen throughout the years is just unmitigated greed. And that's the problem there. We've had our rights as homeowners stripped away and definitely as renters stripped away. The ball has moved from being in the people's court into these corporate entities because it's not even individual landlords that will be affected. It's the bigger ones, the ones that own many rentals that will really feel the impact of this. And what are your thoughts on building back up those rights and renters' rights so they are better protected against bad practices, landlord specials? And it always seems like we paint the landlords as the victims, and We don't ever take into account how often the renters are victimized.
I would like the overseeing of a new commission specifically to deal with this because one of the issues that follows this situation is whenever we look towards these so-called rights, if you don't got the money to prove it, you don't have the right.
It's hard to do anything unless you can afford an attorney.
Inherently, you don't have any rights under this system if you don't have a public defender. Alabama does not have a statewide public defender system currently.
That is outrageous. I'm sorry, I'm fucking speechless. This I had no idea.
Robert E. Broker.
You really did. This is insane to me.
They will appoint someone, the judge will normally appoint a lawyer locally, and there is a fund for that. But there isn't like an overarching statewide public defender system where they've trained them, where they are adequately funded, where they actually have some type of governmental standing. None of that.
It's good, Robert, that you're addressing these things because I want to say this is like top to bottom. This is state to state. This isn't even an Alabama thing. It's an everybody thing, but it definitely has hit Alabama really hard, even in areas you wouldn't think it. I am very much into nationalizing a lot of things that are just basic rights: shelter over your head, power, water, food. I still think people can make money, but not at the expense of others. Should never come to exploitation. And that's what we're at right now. Everything is exploitation. We're nickel and dimed everywhere. And it shouldn't be over our basic needs.
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure that we have somebody working towards the betterment of man because out of the 140 elected seats between the governor all the way down to state house members, do you know how many of them are coming off of working in the working class?
It's gonna make me mad, isn't it?
Yeah. We're talking about individuals that made less than $40,000. So the general populace of the state of Alabama, there's only two of them.
Yep, made me mad.
Most of them are lawyers, businessmen, or politicians from another elected position. So most of them already made 50 to 60K well before they started. It sometimes can be difficult for our local legislative members and even just politicians in general in Alabama to understand, hey, this light bill's an extra $100. Because maybe for them, they're like, okay, that's a rounding error. Because you don't start being able to really survive in Alabama until you have 50, 60, and most people in Alabama only make 20K. And because when you're elected, you start off at 52, you start off in a framework of relatively less problems when it comes to being able to afford things. So, from their perspective, it is harder for them to say, why can't you do this? When most of them have already been in business since the 90s when it was a lot more affordable to take a risk and fail. Because that's another thing. We have plenty of options. We have plenty of capability. We have plenty of talent. We don't have the risk margin. Taking a big risk currently in Alabama, you cannot do because you have to survive. So what ends up happening is less people are willing to take risks, less people are willing to innovate and invent things in this area because they could potentially become homeless.
Love that you are working so hard and really looking at a huge problem that has been festering that nobody else is wanting to touch with a 10-foot pole.
The next couple of questions I've got pertain to housing, and these are questions that are things I have heard from other people, arguments I've heard against rent stabilization and government interference in the housing market. And I know it's come to light after Scott Bessent made some statements yesterday pertaining to Trump's policy where he's going to limit corporations from owning single family homes. But the majority of rental properties nationwide, including in Alabama, are owned by small investors, private owners. There are many who argue that rent stabilization or any sort of government interference in housing, this could hurt them. And many of these landlords are retirees on a fixed income. What would you say to them?
The first thing I would say is this would affect those individuals who own two properties or more. So if you're someone who owns a house and rents a second house, this wouldn't affect you. If you own 3 or 4 houses, then yes, we need to start having a conversation because I understand where you're coming from with fixed income. I'm not saying we're taking away your income. I'm saying that we're also going to try to help others with fixed incomes and how it potentially scares you, potentially scares other people who are not as fortunate as you to own 3 or 4 houses. I understand where you're coming from. This isn't to hurt you. When you raise the impoverished rating of an area, you then raise the desperation of the area. Then you raise the criminality of people willing to do things that they would never do if they weren't homeless or starving in the area. And you can't use the moniker of they should go get a job when the job that's currently trying to pay them can't afford you raising the rent. It's also one of the things I want to look at for a universal minimum wage because Alabama currently does not have a minimum wage. The federal government just forces us to. If it was up to state legislature members, many have said they'd make it $4. Now, how many of us can live off of $4 an hour?
I made more than that babysitting in the 90s. That is insane that someone would think that people could survive on $4 an hour.
They're clueless. They are so out of touch. And you'll find that with people have always kind of been in a comfortable situation. They don't truly understand what it's like. I mean, there's been instances in my life where the only meal I ate during the day was the leftovers from my son's plate. And that was even like portioned out. So I've been there. I've been there where food securities exist and watching what's happening now, I wouldn't have survived. I made $9.25 back then too, and that was like 2008, 2009, and I was going without something, even at that price point. So I couldn't imagine $4 an hour in today's prices. As we're sitting here talking about it, and we're talking about the affordability of just life in general, but specifically to the housing market, it's definitely a multifaceted issue. It's not the only thing that's keeping people from thriving. It's also wages. It's healthcare costs, it's really anything that people need to pay for to live a full and happy, healthy life. What are your plans on addressing all these points if you can?
So I think the first thing that needs to happen is we need to put rails into the system that we currently have. And the problem is what I want and what my community potentially wants may not be able to pass muster in this current state legislature. So things like potential rent freeze will not be possible here, but a capping of the rent of 10% may be possible.
So you're talking about putting in like the beginnings of a safety net to stop
hmm
them from escalating further. You're putting speed bumps in place or want to push speed bumps in these different areas to ensure that we can at least slow what's happening.
Yes, due to the fact that it takes one thing going wrong in your life currently to detrimentally affect you for months, years, or just take your life. The less that you are able to go off road because there are rails, the better I think community members will have it. It's one of those situations where, yes, would I prefer much stronger positions? I would, and I will fight for those. But currently, I need to make sure people don't die. We are in positions of authority, and when we have this authority, we're supposed to be looking forward to help people. We're not supposed to be cowering behind what is possible, because what's possible today could not be possible tomorrow. The same thing was said in the 40s. It is not possible to have a minimum wage. It's not possible to stop kids from going to factories and losing their fingers. These are things we fought and we beat. The plan and the capability is there. I think it's important to start pressuring and pushing forward with saving lives before we save profits.
And with everything going on, it's really hard to know where to start and what needs to take priority. So let's take a break and we'll have more with Robert Hunter in just a minute.
Want more Bama Blue Dot content? Make sure to follow us on Blue Sky, TikTok, and YouTube at Bama Blue Dots, or visit us at BamaBlueDots.com.
Welcome back, y'all. We've been talking to Robert Hunter, candidate for Alabama's House District 28, about some of the issues facing his district in Etowah County. I want to shift gears to more of the politics in play regarding you as a candidate. For the break, we discussed many of the issues facing our state and your district. How exactly do you plan to address those, and how do you plan to achieve those solutions in a state where the GOP has such an extreme supermajority?
So, the first thing is understanding where we are and where we come from, which currently cannot be fixed the way it is. I know that the GOP is gigantically large. However, there are actions that can be taken outside of the party system, which I fully intend on doing. And it's important to make sure that we start combating multiple avenues. Just because we get something passed does not mean that we're going to automatically get this rosy situation. It's probably going to be like 10 fights down the road. One of the things that's going to happen is when I win, I'll be putting together a bill specifically for the actionable item of rent capping. When I put that bill together, I'm going to have a press conference about the bill. I'm then going to go into my community and start working on renter unions, setting up systems, teaching people how to do rental unions, because I think it's also important to know that we're not really advocating outside of the state legislature. I think we need to do a better job of going into communities and trying to advocate for them through them. So, introduce the bill, start building rental unions in my own location, and then start documenting what worked, how it worked, and then sending it off to other locations to start their own rental unions, because it has to get out of committee before you can even get a floor vote. And once you get a floor vote, then you have to deal with how do we pressure those who voted no. I think it fails on arrival the first year. Second year, through advocacy, we get a bill vote in the committee. We fail the committee vote by about 1 to 2 votes. Third year, after advocacy in those areas and rental unions in those areas, we win the committee vote by 1 to 2 votes. And mind you, I say votes, not Republicans, because there will be Democrats that are against this, because there are Democrats that are for a profitability system that is not helpful to community members because their rent went up $400. And then going into the fourth year, which will be an election year, we're going to be taking those connective tissue segments of these rental unions to go and start targeting certain seats and individuals that we've talked about. That way, they have to be willing to at least have the conversation of why weren't you for making my rent affordable?
Can I just say, I am so impressed by your answer because I think so many on the left, we've come jaded because so many times we're promised things and there's no cohesive plan. We're going to give you the moon, we're going to give you all these things, and then it never comes to fruition. I so appreciate you having such a detailed plan. You haven't just thought through what you're going to do, but the timeline it's going to take to do it. I'm just so beyond impressed with that because that is something I feel like politicians on the left do not set realistic expectations to the constituency. And I think that's a lot of why we do so horribly because people feel let down a lot. Like, I do want to hear more about these renters unions. How do people go about creating those? Because that's something that I've personally not heard a lot about. I've heard about them as a concept, but how do they look in action?
It starts with having conversations with individuals about how many of us have the same landlord with issues. How many of us at one time are willing to spend an hour a week talking to that landlord? How many of us are willing to try to raise some of that money to give to the landlord to deal with this? Once we get to that point, we then have a conversation of what do we actually want to see done. Then we start having a conversation of what are the consequences. After that conversation, we have a realistic conversation about what can we do next, because we've tried every other form. We've tried advocacy. We have tried some type of public private partnership where we give money to fix a problem. Once we get to that point where we have community members on the same page, it's time for direct action. We're going to work with some of our community members to try to find replacement rentals, locations that the community members will get together and help them move into if the landlord wants to get real vindictive and just get them removed. We want to make sure we set them up. And at that point, we're going to start protesting and boycotting them.
Just out of curiosity, so let's say someone listening today is dealing with a landlord issue. Are there any resources for people that maybe want to form a renters union privately?
We would have to build a new system down here because we have less protections. We can't do half of the stuff that other states can do because we have very little protections.
And sometimes it's not that they have actionable steps to begin with. It's just about solidarity in your community and that everyone come to a consensus that this is enough. It's like and sometimes the first steps is just meeting your neighbors and coming together and starting down that road. That takes time. But yes, Robert, you're very right. We don't have any protections here in Alabama.
I don't want to sell false dreams. So when I say I don't currently have the techniques to deal with this right now, it's because we have to build one from scratch. Also, I am just the lightning rod focal point for right now until we can build out the system.
Being the focal point to start facilitating that, sometimes that's good enough. And it's good that's something you're advocating for is power back to the people. So, let's talk about current incumbent, Mac Butler. He ran unopposed. Etowah County went to Trump with 77% of the vote. Many would say that the odds are stacked against any Democrat in these races. What are your plans to overcome those kind of margins?
So the first thing I would say is my district has been held by a Democrat going from 1977 all the way up to 2018. Only in the last two cycles has a Republican held it. And in those last two cycles, the Republicans have lost nearly 500 votes.
So, how did Mac Butler end up running unopposed? There was just no Democrat that would step up? Or was there like a shift in the demographics or anything that caused that to change?
I think when it went from what people considered an automatic Democratic win to a hard fought potential Democratic win, but you could lose, less people cared. Most people want a winner. They do not want to actually fight for these issues because they could lose. But losing means you fall forward. That is still progression. And they thought someone else would step up. Now, another thing I think that needs to be notated is we know for a fact that there's never been a Republican that's got more than 7,100 votes in this area. But there has been Democrats. Kamala Harris got 7,000 like 300. So the votes are there to win. It's just a monster of a fight to actually make it winnable.
And this goes back to where the Democratic Party has, as a whole, across Alabama, doesn't feel like it's grown and kept pace with the Republican Party. You look at any of these races, they've got 10, 15 people running for the same position. they don't care. It's a free for all. And here, it's lucky if we get a handful of people on the ballot. We've talked about this and just watching Alabama as a whole change, just some of the industries that have come here just in the past 20 years. The landscape has changed, but why vote when it's just going to be red? And I think that's a lot of the apathy there. So I'd be really excited to see what you end up doing.
I'm relying on the fact that I fully intend on having the best ground game, the best social media game. I fully intend on doing more op-eds. I fully intend on knocking more doors. I fully intend on having more endorsements. I fully intend on having more social media presence. I fully intend on having more actual in-person events. I think as a whole, I've got to outwork him in every single area. I want both myself, but I also want my community to be represented by someone who's like, hey, I'm going to come and shoot it straight. I want someone who is trying to actually help me make a better life. I want better for my community. I want my community to be more affordable. I do promise that when you have to go look at your bills, when you have to go look at that power bill, that you have someone in your community that cares about that and not whatever is happening inside one minority part of the community.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points with that. And I know that affordability has been a huge topic. With the 2026 midterms approaching, there's a lot of pressure on the Democratic Party to perform and take back our government. In your opinion, if they do take back the House, what is the first thing they need to prioritize? I'm talking about the national level. Can we undo what's been done?
I think the first thing that needs to happen is they need to make an assessment to see how much damage has been done. There needs to be an investigation specifically on the use of funds and also the Epstein cover up. But I think that we're getting to the point where we're not going to see justice for those who have been harmed because they're too tightly aligned with conservatives that are in positions of power. I think there needs to be public condemnation of individuals that are in those files, regardless if it hurts people politically. Because if you have affiliations with a pedophile ring, you should not be in office.
It's so crazy we even have to clarify that nowadays.
So I think there needs to be a hard look on who we elect as House leader because there are going to be issues that pop up that you're not going to like. A great example being Palestine. It's going to be hard for people to get around the idea that it's a destabilizing situation in general. It's also an apartheid. It will be something that's brought up, and I'm not going to be in support of anybody that is for atrocities. And there are plenty of politicians who are for it because they get political money to run for office from them.
So I'm guessing you're not a big fan of APAC.
No, I'm not a big fan of a foreign country's influence on my country, especially when its influence is negative.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. And yeah, we have to just be very careful of who we're electing and not just vote blue no matter who. But I think that falls back onto our shoulders as the people to do what you did. Step up and do something. Run for office, volunteer, get involved in your state's local Democratic Party, get involved somewhere, some way, and not just sit by hoping somebody does something that you may or may not like. I know I asked you early, kind of off the record, what got you into politics. I am curious about what political leader, past or present, do you look up to or potentially want to emulate?
So I would say when we're talking about past history over what it means to have effect after we win would be FDR because you push for a workers' bill of rights, you only get half of that with Social Security, but that still helps people. Social Security to this day is what keeps people off the streets. I have family members in my family that would be on the streets if it wasn't for Social Security. You have the dream of something being better than the way it is now, which is one of the reasons why I would also say when it comes to specifically organizing, I think of late and great organizers like Baynard Rustin. Baynard Rustin is the person I would think of when it comes to organizing long term because you cannot expect electoral success to be the only success because there are certain actions that people will take outside of the political system. They'll take legal action. They'll take organizing action. So you have to make sure you're ready for that. Also say Bernie Sanders. Mostly because he at least understood the fact of being in the moment and being the bridge. And understanding that he, while being the bridge, is not guaranteed to be the person that gets over the bridge.
I like old Bernie. Billionaires should not exist because if you've got that much money, you've exploited somebody at this point. So
What I would say is billionaires can exist if we've already paid for universal childcare, universal college, universal homes. Because at that point, yeah, there is excess money for you to play around with. But currently, we don't have any of that. There's no reason why Switzerland, who has, we'll just say, a third or fourth of the size of the economy of America, can have childcare and we can't. People will say, oh, well, over 10 years, it would cost like $1 trillion to have universal health care. I agree, it would. But you're telling me you love the Iraq war more than you love making sure you don't have to pay copays ever again? Because we spent more than $1 trillion in Iraq.
billionaires should not exist in our current framework because they got there through exploitation. Now, like you said, it should never be at the cost of somebody else. So, are there any, other statewide or nationwide races that you're watching closely or keyed into right now?
There's a few. I would like to see what the margins are for the Public Service Commission PSC meeting elections because I think that people need more options when it comes to what service is supposed to be. I'm interested in seeing what seats we aren't able to fill for elections post the cutoff because I would like at a later date to go and try to talk to those individuals like, hey, no one in your area stepped up for this position. Is it just because it's not competitive or is there another issue? I'm also very interested with the internal SDEC elections.
We're actually both on the SDEC ballot.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're
Yeah.
both on there. She's running hers and I'm running mine. For me, I was be the change you want to see. Kind of like how you stepped up. That's what I did. I've been using every resource at my disposal to try and fix what I just feel like they gave up on us. And we gave up on ourselves almost in a way for the past 10, 15 years.
I think that people give up because life is hard enough as it is. Nobody wants extra work. Even if it's the right work, nobody wants extra work. Not when they think it's going to be a waste of time. I don't blame them. I will say the Robert Hunter candidate you see today is a pale comparison of the Robert Hunter at the very end of the campaign is going to be. Just because that's how that works. It's a ton of experiences. It's a ton of actions that build you into a different person. That's why people prefer candidates that's already ran before, which goes into candidate recruitment. I wish the state party would do a better job of recruiting people for local candidates. That way, when it's time for state offices, they can say, hey, this is a face you know in your community, and you have something to build off of. We don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I got involved. Normally I'm heads down working. I've been in tech for 20 plus years. Trying to find a job for the past year, it's been a nightmare. Normally I don't have any problem. But between tech companies not being female friendly, businesses being unsure with tariffs and all the insanity, jobs definitely dried up. So now they have me to deal with. Now I'm their problem. And I'm not the type of person you want to be your problem. I'm using every skill set that I've ever developed, and I've been putting that towards my county's executive committee and making sure that their resources are up to date, that their tech stack is good, that we have the tools to help build communities. But I want to take that up to the state level too, because there's so much that I'm flabbergasted when they put data that would help us win behind a paywall.
But I mean, that's also another issue. About about a year ago, there was a Google Doc. I know because I put my information in, asking, would you be willing to volunteer? Would you be willing to run? I've never been reached out to about that Google Doc since.
Did you ever see the video of Indivisible and some of our ladies chasing off Barrymore from his town hall? That's that girl right there. Oh, troublemaker right there. But
Kind of started that.
yeah, so me being terminally online, it was crazy to me to see people go, "Oh wow, I didn't even know there were Democrats. These girls are from my area. I didn't even know any of this existed. That's crazy." And I was like, "That is crazy. How many people don't know?"
Yeah, I also think that's an organizing issue. I love the fact, and let me shout out Alabama Progress, but like I've learned of at least 10 people from that Discord, but also from individuals posting about it on TikTok that I would not have known. But that's another great example. Do we have a system of social media influencers or individuals in general? Because I think that's another thing we're missing, because we have to go where people's eyes are. I think we need to do a better job of actually reaching people where they are, because that's another issue I think the Democratic Party as a whole does not do a good job of. It's also the reason why I am a Democratic Socialist, because if you believe that the Democratic Party is not doing enough, I guarantee you the DSA is somewhere trying to do it. I joined the DSA around the same time I started the Free Store because the Democratic Party in my area was not doing enough material. So I stepped up and I joined the DSA to do so.
I tell most people, go check out your local Democrats. They're not like your national or even at the state level. A lot of times they're a lot more progressive. They're people like me or you just trying to get things going in their area. They just need more engagement. And I did. I when I showed up to the meeting, what would you recommend for anybody that feels lost or is looking to make a difference, doesn't know how to do that? Like, where should they start if they feel very alone in their area here in Alabama?
So the first thing I would do is I would go to the Secretary of State's office and go look at the voter registration just to look at the number. They have it at the big bold print at the top. 3 million voters are in this state, or a little bit above 3 million. About 500,000 of those are Republicans, but another almost 500,000 are Democrats. That means there are Democrats somewhere. Mathematically, you are not alone. That's number one. We want to challenge the mindset that you are alone, that you have to do this alone. That is a conservative, rugged individualist mindset. We're looking for hope, peace, and collectivism. Then I would highly suggest the Alabama Progress Discord. You should be able to get in touch with them through TikTok. After that point, I would go looking to your Democratic County Party and I would try to go join. Now, if you feel that the Democratic County Party is not doing enough, that they care about the minutia, the minuscule of who's the chair over who's delivering groceries and who's fixing brake lights for community members, then I highly suggest you go look for your local DSA, which there's one that covers the Huntsville area, there's one that covers the Birmingham area, there's one that covers, if I remember correctly, the Montgomery area, and one for the Mobile area.
I really can't think of a better note to end this podcast on, because that's what we're all about. That's why we started doing this, is because we want to help people build community and find their community in this red state. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell our listeners where they can learn more about you, your campaign, and how to connect with you?
Yes, you can go to www.voteforroberthunter.com. You can find me at most Democratic events that are in Etowah County. You can reach out to me on TikTok, reach out to me on Facebook. It's Vote for Robert Hunter, Alabama House District 28. My Act Blue is Robert Hunter, Alabama House District 28. If you live in Etowah County, Blount County, St. Clair, Calhoun, Cherokee, DeKalb, or Marshall, you're within driving distance of me for local events. And if you're not, I still want your help. For those that do want to come to local events, most of them will be in the Gadsden area or in the Rainbow City area. You can find any and all of my other information at my website, which will also have my link tree attached, which will include a form to get involved with the campaign.
Well, We wish you all the best in your campaign, and we cannot wait to see you in the Alabama State House. We hope y'all will all tune in next week. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music. And if you'd like to see bonus content and an extended interview with Robert Hunter, please follow us on TikTok at Bama Blue Dots. And remember, if there are any questions you have or topics you'd like to see us discuss on this podcast, please visit our website at bamabluedots.com. Bye, y'all.